What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Mental Health Movement Podcast, Voice for the Voiceless. I, of course, am your host, Chris. Today, we're going to do a little bit of a different process than what we usually do. We're going to do an interview. Caleb has wrote down some questions for me to answer along with some of our group members. This episode is just called "Get to Know Your Mental Health Advocate" slash host. Caleb, how you doing today, man?
Doing good, man. How about yourself?
Oh, not bad, man. Just another Sunday, just trying to enjoy the weekend, getting the future podcast guests um booked and all the questions sent out. Very excited for these next couple weeks. Um for those of you who have given me feedback on the most recent episode on single parenthood, I do greatly appreciate the feedback and the support. Um, Again, like I mentioned in that episode, I know I'm not a parent, and I know a lot of what I talked about is hard to talk about when you don't have kids for yourself. But speaking through the eyes of somebody who grew up with basically a broken home and everything, I felt like it was a very relevant topic, especially in today's world where co-parenting just seems to be, I don't want to say impossible, but very difficult, especially with social media and everything else. So let's kick it off with the first question, Gil.
Well, first off, thanks for having me, Chris. I've
Yeah, man.
been on it before, and it's awesome to see where you've come from to where you're going, especially some of the podcast guests that you have booked up. And I actually
Yeah.
have a couple questions about that here further into the group. But I figured this should just be a good podcast for everyone out there to get to know you a little more. Because generally, you're the one doing the interviews,
Right.
but today you'll be the one being interviewed. So the first question is just a basic one for those that don't know, what got you into the mental health movement or, into mental health in general.
So, for everybody who has listened or anybody who has been a friend of mine for a while knows my story, but for those listeners who don't know my story at all, I attempted to unalive myself twice. Once when I was about 27, 26, 27, and once when I was 14. Both times, well, actually, the first time when I started trying to get help for myself, I was paired with a gambling addiction therapist. It was outpatient therapy, and quite frankly, to be blunt, it was a joke. I didn't have any help that got me anywhere in my life in a positive direction after my first attempt. And then the second attempt, I finally got to that point in my life where it's like, okay, I need to start helping me. I need to stop being there for just everybody and start showing up for myself. So when I started therapy the first time in Jersey, she helped me open my eyes to a lot of the things that were going on between my mom and just everything else, quite frankly. And it basically got me to the point of I need to show up for myself. I need to get myself out of the environment that I was in. So fast forward to the pandemic when I finally started going to therapy again. I had created the mental health group for a safe space for people to share their story, and it started off with me sharing my story and me sharing things about myself that I didn't know I was so open to sharing. Our group started out public, and we got a lot of members really fast. And when I started sharing more and more, somebody's like, I think this should be a private group because there are a lot of stories that have been told in there, including by myself, that quite frankly, the people that they may or may not be about, um,
They see them or
yeah, may see them and react to it in a negative way. So,
or
what got
even
me
family of that person might, no, I never knew you felt like that about so and so.
right, and what got me into it is I never had that person for me growing up. I, like I said in my last podcast, divorced parents when I was 8. Never had a close relationship with either of my siblings, and that was due to our home environment and our parents. Um, but creating that group and that safe space, it gave me the motivation to want to give other people a voice that never had it before.
Because I was going to say, I know, I mean, you could there's a difference between doing therapy and stuff for yourself, but you show up for like mental health wise for other people too, not just for yourself or with therapy. Like you have the group that's over 1,700 people. You have the podcast that you do every 2 weeks. Whether it gets 100 views an episode or 10, you're still booking guests, striving forward too. So it's very much your own dealing in, I guess, your lack of mental health uh, awareness growing up that made you want to be involved into it and spread the word for other people.
Yeah, man. When I first created the group, I didn't think it was going to blow up. I had an idea what I wanted to do with the group when we started it. I didn't know where it was going to go. So it's good to see so many people come together for the same cause, and it's even better to see so many people be willing to offer non-judgmental feedback to everybody in the group. Of course, we've had speed bumps with some people, but that's part of life. Yeah, that's part of life. Not everybody's going to agree on the same thing.
But that's also part of the group is being able to almost agree to disagree.
Right.
So you've done pretty well with keeping politics and different opinions on stuff like that out of the group and really focus on what the core message is in this mental health, especially with June being Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. Because isn't Men's Mental Health Day in May?
So there is a Men's Mental Health Day in May, but there's so June is technically Men's Health Month, which yeah, so it basically everybody who's involved in this community, whether it's my future guest Shar or whoever it is, we recognize both June and November. And I've seen people say, oh, well, November is towards testicular cancer. I'm like, well, it is, but they push for screenings for testicular cancer for men. Yeah. But November is Men's Mental Health Month as well as June. Like I always tell you, and I tell all my followers and everything else, I don't think everybody should be relegated to just a month because it falls into that hashtag. It falls into that social media pool of
kind of like we see with other certain holidays that have months where companies go all out for that month, and then exactly the first of the next month rolls around and it's back to
And see, this is what drives me crazy about relegating people to a month is okay. We're shoved in a month where we're supposed to have awareness. Where is that awareness? It's supposed to be XYZ for men's health. Where is that awareness for men?
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm an advocate for all mental health, and men, women, whatever. I just feel that it shouldn't be a month. I think everybody should. It should be an all year thing for everybody, for race, for skin, for race, for gender, whatever it is. I don't think we should be all shoved into a month because it creates that division. It creates that lack of awareness. Because again, we're just a hashtag. It shouldn't be just a damn hashtag.
It's more than it should be brought up. Like health constantly is.
Yeah.
You don't just go to the doctor once a year. You go for regulations and checkups.
Exactly.
But that brings us to the next question: is what inspired you to do the podcast, video, YouTube that we're doing now?
So the podcast idea was I was throwing that around for a little while with Santi.
Sorry to interrupt, but it has been about just over a year now.
Yeah, I believe either March or April, I believe was the exact year. I don't remember exactly the start date. But I tossed around the podcast idea with Santi before he passed away, and I was dragging my feet on it for a while. And when his unfortunate passing came, it's just like, okay, I want to do this, but I'm not sure how to go about it because for those of you who are aware of it, in the pandemic, there was a lot of podcasts, quite frankly, and it just kind of seemed like it was hard to get into the podcast world because there's so many podcasts.
Like the new fad, TikTokers,
right?
Everything,
And it's so hard to grow on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok. It's if you don't have either A, the right support, or B, the right kind of marketing
Or
behind you.
connections
Yeah,
to famous people to share
right.
it.
And it's impossible to get your brand out there. I mean,
But it's not impossible. I mean,
yeah, no, you're right.
I might skip ahead on this question, but you know, speaking of that, you have a few guests that you have booked up. I don't know if you want to spoil that for everyone and let them know now, or you want to announce it later.
So
But what are some workings you have for?
so when this podcast drops, both both guests will have aired on here, but um, we're gonna have both Sydney, who is a generation a cycle breaking influencer, and then she's also helps with trauma. Um, she helps with childhood trauma. Um, she has in her bio it's trauma transformer, and then we have Shar, who is going to be is a men's mental health advocate. She's very, 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 very heavy on that message as mine. And when I initially sent her the questions, she was like, you could push a little harder, like, because she's very aggressive on the message, and with that subject, you have to be aggressive. And I told her, I said, I don't want to send a weird message if I send aggressive questions. And I told her, I said,
Yeah, I feel in today's world it's very.
it's
You
very
might say
easy.
the one wrong thing,
Right.
and you don't want to be the thing you got blown up about, and
Hmm.
your social media takes off
Exactly.
because someone heard one clip and mistook it, and now
Exactly.
that's how sadly it is. But it's because both Shar and Cindy are there. I mean, I know Shar does manages mental health social media for a living, so that's a pretty big guest among the already published authors that
Right.
we've had on here. Those were, I mean, Tiffany's published. She's a published author, and her episode was out back in August of last year.
Hmm.
So I mean, coming out of the gate, you can come in pretty strong with some the authors. She's the NAMI vice president, or
Yeah. So she's a vice president of NAMI in North Carolina. She wrote a book called Simply De-escalate, which covers the de-escalation of people that are experiencing mental health struggles. Because I feel like for the longest time we sent police officers to mental health distress, and with her line of work, she's in the crisis intervention training uh, in police stations, and she basically gives training to police officers to de-escalate situations instead of, oh well, you're having an anxiety attack and you attack somebody or whatever it is, so we're going to throw you in jail. Instead, they send out the crisis intervention therapists to de-escalate those people, and she's one of those people who falls in that category.
that's good because a little off topic, but recently I saw a clip scrolling on Facebook. I don't know what happened before or after, but the caption said there was someone was attempting suicide, and the cops showed up. And not saying I could have the caption could have been wrong. The cops showed up and pretty much
Terminate them.
terminated without even like talking down. He just pretty much showed up and just terminated them. So that can be while we always support the cops and everything, but it could be there's definitely got to be. I know it's with the budget and everything, it's hard to know when to show up, but at least have someone with them or have them better trained to deal with people that might be autistic and having a panic or a freak out or something like that. But back to the podcast now. Like you said, you've had a few, quite a few big guests on, more big guests coming up. Where would you like to see the podcast get to, or what would you like to see, and what would you like to accomplish more with the podcast?
So I've been asked that question a couple times, and I don't really have like a definitive answer on it, just because, when the conversation of monetizing it, or, just adding ads in there so it adds money into the podcast, like, I feel like the second you start making money off of something you're passionate about, it becomes a job and it becomes a chore. And I don't want it to get to that point. But like I tell Jess all the time, like, there's therapists that deal with like some heavy shit and get massively underpaid. You all those years of getting a degree, and you don't make all the amount of years worth that you put into school reflecting on your job. And while it would be great to blow up in that podcast to a point where I can make it a living or
Yeah.
make a living off of it, I want to steer the course that I'm going with right now and just like kind of slowly building instead of just like, all right, I'm gonna monetize it while I'm small. And it's I say small, it's in 14 countries. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
that's a
not.
lot.
Yeah, I know you may not, be wanting the views
Right.
necessarily where you want them, but you are technically international, all over the world.
Mhm.
The group is at 1,700 plus members, which I remember when we were trying to get it to 8 to 9 to 1,000. Now you're coming up on 2,000. That was necessary. I know, you don't want to put in the ads and stuff, but maybe, some people might say monetizing it might be able to help get
Yeah,
the message
yeah,
out there more, because we do have the mental health, the logo
right,
on the hoodies, which we don't make any, you don't make any money
right.
on that. That's just, but you can also maybe start, possibly doing some charity, something with that in the
Yeah.
future if it blows up to
I thought about
like
looking into like a nonprofit. Um, Again, it's just there's a lot of pieces that go into that, and I'm still trying to
yeah,
put together the podcast in a way where it's presentable, which I don't think there's anything wrong with the format now, but I want to get it to a point where it looks very professional. I have a proper intro, which I have the intro
see,
on
honestly, your
Spotify.
intro, when I click it on, it's something about it where I can be on my way home from work or at driving to work at 6 in the morning and hearing the beginning.
Right, the piano.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the I don't know what's one tune or beat or
Right.
whatever, but that feels soothing. And you have like a Morgan Freeman esque kind of like way of like just the way like when you talk in the podcast, like
Right.
it's like a very like
Monotone voice.
no, like just a woosah, like
Right.
it's just very calming
Yeah.
listening to the
I've
podcast.
actually had a lot of people tell me that um, funny enough, that was actually one of the things I wanted to do for a very long time was get into radio, get into commentary and stuff like that. You
And so
you know
maybe
that
look
part,
into the
right?
broadcasting school, but as everything else in this world, money,
Money complicates everything.
yeah, which is why it's really some like I know therapists, people think they make great money and stuff like that, and they might. I know it costs money, but they really a lot of them do what they do because they love it. They love helping
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And I've also seen studies show that a lot of therapists and psychiatrists have to have their own
Hmm.
therapist
Oh
or
yeah. Oh
psychiatrist. And
yeah.
when you have people
I
unloading,
mean, think about this for a second.
especially if you're an empath, and you
Yeah.
can feel what they're feeling.
Right. And think about this for a second. There are therapists designated to specific type of therapy. Like, the kids who have survived the school shootings or had to go through that. I
Yeah,
couldn't imagine being a therapist
and
and trying to counsel somebody through that
yeah, or
without my own
like
therapist.
the sexual assault
Yeah.
therapists and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
My therapist in Jersey, she before she got her or worked for that clinic that she was in, she would help sex trafficking victims.
That's a heavy,
Yeah, and I
like,
just when I first met her, I was just like, I therapists who love what they do and don't do it for just the money are godsend. Like
oh yeah, and
the
even
dedication it takes just to help somebody through
yeah,
trauma.
and I think like what a lot of people don't think about when they get law enforcement and stuff. Hey, too, like some of the stuff that they are scenes that they arrive on and show up to when they show up to people at their worst moments of their life.
Right.
I was at my barber a few years ago, and she knows an officer that had responded to a shooting where a kid was shot. He put in his 2 weeks after that. He rode in the hospital in the helicopter with the kid and stuff. Kid didn't end up making it, but it's like it's one of those you have to have almost like a disconnect.
Yeah, and you know what?
Like you gotta
When it
not
comes
shut
to
up, but you know.
when it comes to like law enforcement stuff, I don't know those statistics on how many more men or how many more women work in law enforcement. It's just an assumption that there are more men in that
Yeah.
field. It also goes in that conversation that a lot of men don't speak out about the shit that they have gone through. And those same people could become police officers who, experience one thing when they were as a kid and then they experience it again, but you're seeing it happen to somebody else. And that triggers something in their brain. And we get all these stories all over the news saying, oh, police officer killed this
Hmm.
person,
Yeah.
XYZ.
Police officer might have grown up with an abusive father and
Right.
goes on to a scene with an abusive father,
Yeah.
and the,
Just
the
see red.
9-year-old boy in him
Right.
that couldn't defend himself now
Exactly.
is coming back out. So that's
Right.
another,
Rub dirt in it
yeah,
mentality.
but that's a whole nother topic of conversation.
Oh
That's a
yeah.
whole nother episode. So I have another question here now. What do you think the not men's mental health, but the mental health, I guess, movement needs now and today? Because obviously you see it's all over TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. But what, besides everyone just posting about it and talking about it, what do you think needs to be done? Whether it's more better counseling,
Hmm.
more, I guess,
So you're talking about just
awareness.
like mental health in general.
Yeah, like just the movement, if you so, not necessarily the Facebook group, but like the national, like,
Right, right.
in general.
I just feel I wish there was more money in the mental health field,
Yeah.
simply for the fact that there aren't resources available to everybody. I mean, I have friends in the UK who tell me how bad getting mental health stuff is there. And it's like that here too. I mean, granted, our processes are probably different than the processes over
Yeah.
there are.
I don't know if, like, I know around here we have the Baker Act,
Yeah.
which
And that's,
I don't know if
it
that's
can
like a
help.
national thing or if that's just
I
in
think I
Florida
think that's a
or
US thing. I
because
don't know.
I never knew it was two words like Baker
Yeah.
Act. I always thought it was like one whole
Yeah.
thing.
My mom has been Baker acted
I've had,
a couple
friends and
times.
stuff. It's the 72-hour hold. For those that
Mhm.
don't know, the Baker Act is if you feel someone is suicidal,
Suicidal
a
or just like a
family,
mental detriment to others
yeah,
around them.
hurtful to themselves or
Mhm.
others, you can call the cops and they'll call it the Baker Baker Act, where they get a hold of them, arrest them, not arrest them, but
Detain them.
detain them on a psych hold for
Right.
72 hours at the harbor.
But if I'm not mistaken, if they're an adult, they can release themselves technically, can't they?
I believe so, depending
Because I know with minors they can't,
with
obviously.
minors, yeah, but it depends if you go there and you obviously have had a history of schizophrenia or something, they
Right.
won't just let you check yourself out.
Yeah, yeah,
But
that makes sense.
if you said you wanted to unalive yourself and they bring you in there, you technically, I think after there's a minimum time they gotta hold you, but you can
Right,
check yourself out instead of doing the full 72 hours.
right. But yeah, man, I wish there was more resources available to people, more affordable resources at that. Um, because while we have free therapy, free therapy is great for the people who can't really afford
Yeah,
therapists. The problem with okay, let me reword that. The struggle I see with free therapy is you're going to a therapist who's a not getting money from the patient to do 30
like any
45 minutes.
government paycheck
Yeah,
or
and it's kind of at the point where I don't know if you saw the movie Joker, where basically it's like the government's cutting off the funds
yeah,
for that therapist and they're not be able to provide therapy to their patients anymore. it's it's a positive, but I just see free therapy as one of those things where you're getting what you pay for and you're not paying for anything. So it's just kind of like
it's like
how does
talking,
that make you feel? Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
and
that happened to you. How does that make you
I
feel?
have someone that's like that is a brother to me that does go somewhere where there is free therapy,
Hmm.
and I mean they had they without putting too much of business out there, they immediately like to try to go to the medicine route,
Hmm.
and while I feel like the ones that do it care, they can't afford to care as much as they want to because they have you got a boss when you're working at a free therapy clinic and
Right.
stuff. So there's only, it's like having a public defender as an attorney. You might get one that really goes above and beyond. It does more than his hourly wage.
Right.
You might have one that comes in and checks out. So it's definitely I know funding is a big issue, but I feel like the movement has come in the last 20 years a lot more in progression. Because I remember growing up, if you went to therapy or had a
Oh,
psychologist, you were crazy.
crazy.
Like you were
Right.
like, remember in elementary school, those kids that were like, "Oh, he's on medicine."
He's on Adderall.
Yeah,
He
that
must
was
be
a big
crazy.
thing, which that's a whole nother
Yeah.
topic. But even not even the Adderall, just then like the ones with the misbehavioral issues and that were, it was like ooh, don't say anything. Oh, he's on therapy. Well, your uncle, he's on. He has to see a psychiatrist. And now, luckily, that stigma I feel is breaking. That's something that I had heard from a buddy that goes to therapy. He said his therapist said everyone in the world needs therapy. To for whether you think that the rich people that don't have problems, everyone has
Everybody
something.
has something to deal with
Yeah.
for sure.
So
But just to stress that point too, again, I'll say it every episode if I have to. Therapy isn't for everybody,
no.
but as Sean had said in the podcast I had with him, there are other means of healing outside of therapy. There are support groups. You can get a mentor for yourself.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it depends on what you define as therapy.
Right.
It could be
Therapy
therapy, it
isn't the
could be
same for
going and
everybody.
seeing a therapist. It could just be having someone that you talk to that's just subjective and isn't gonna, like doesn't know all of your life personally, so you can tell them stuff you've done and not feel like they're gonna judge you.
Right.
Therapy can be going and sitting at at sunsets, and everyone needs something that eases the mental anguish in life.
Exactly.
Now, another one I have is, what do you think is some of the biggest issues facing mental health currently?
I feel
Budget,
like
obviously.
yeah, so outside of budget, I feel there are way too many people that compare traumas. I feel like if you're friends with somebody and you break your leg or you sprain your ankle and they broke their leg, you say you're in pain. You reply with, "Oh, well, at least it's not broken." As a society, we have a really big problem of not validating each other's experiences. Whether I was abused or not abused, I had shitty parents, you had shitty parents. That should be the common ground. It
Yeah.
shouldn't be, oh, well, I broke my right hand. Oh, well, I broke my whole arm. Trauma is not a competition. And I feel with social media, with just public schools, there are just so many people looking to compare
Well, yeah,
themselves with every
but
situation that they're in.
sadly, that's how, I mean, everyone is brought up being compared,
Right. I
whether
mean,
it's
it's generational cycles. Yeah.
not even generation, but like whether it's test grades, how much money you make,
Mhm.
to what, and I feel it's a double-edged sword. While yeah, you can't compare traumas and stuff like that. I feel a lot of sometimes people make mountains out of molehills
Yeah.
and want everyone to like any minor inconvenience in their life is like, oh my God, this is happening and no one cares. It's like, no, we care. It's just everyone has
You
their
gotta
own
put in the
shit
work to
or own
change
stuff
your shit.
going on. Yeah, like in this, it's like you said, I rolled my ankle, but you broke yours. You're like, wow, yes, my rolled ankle still hurts and still sucks. I'm not gonna come to you and bitch about it because you just broke your ankle.
Right.
It's like knowing when to complain or like how big of an issue. Like, yeah, rolling an ankle still sucks.
I mean,
It's
I
not to
also feel like
diminish my pain, but I gotta realize that I can work around it. I don't need to make it like it's
yeah,
the
I
end of the
guess.
world
I
because I
mean,
rolled my ankle.
right. I mean, me and you knowing each other this long, I mean, is a different situation than most, but I also feel like regardless of what you're going through or what your friend may be going through, yeah, there are instances where, you feel like you can express, hey, I feel this way because I did this, or, and that person's going through what you're going through, you validate each other's experiences, regardless of how heavy or how
Oh
light that
yeah,
experience is.
I
And
just yeah.
that's my biggest thing on that conversation as a whole.
Yeah, it's not
And
like saying, "Oh, my rolled ankle doesn't matter because you broke yours."
right.
It's just
And to add to that
knowing
conversation,
when and where to bring it up. It's like a kind of, like if you like if I don't know if I was
I
with
feel like
somebody
that's a
that just
double-edged sword too, though.
yeah, it's like it's almost like, oh, it could be worse. Like, yeah, it could be worse, but it still sucks because I gotta like this is what's going on in my life.
Like, okay, and I always throw this quote out there because it's true. If you say that somebody can't be sad because other people have it worse, then you can't be happy because other people have it better than you do.
Yeah,
And again,
exactly.
it's that double-edged sword, and goes back to that NAMI comment that or that conversation we had on the NAMI panel when we're talking about suicide numbers. Yes, the facts are there that more men unalive themselves than women. It still happens on both sides, regardless. Like,
Yeah,
yes, I will advocate until the day I die on men's mental health not being talked about. But in order to talk about it, you don't devalue what somebody else is going through to push your point, because it's counterproductive to say that men do something more than women. The problem on the men's mental health side is we're not allowed to talk about it as a society
yeah,
because it's a taboo subject. But women are encouraged to speak out. Women are encouraged to uh, share
yeah,
everything that they're going through, while you and myself in said relationships aren't allowed to talk about if we're experiencing domestic violence, if we're experiencing
Look at
mistreatment from our
Johnny Depp
spouse.
and Amber Heard
Right.
trial.
Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, perfect example. I mean, he's
Yeah,
unhinged himself, but point being,
it's still like
we
a cop
shouldn't,
shows up to domestic violence and
the
it's like
man's going to get
she was
arrested almost
beating the
immediately.
officer. I just tried to,
Right.
it goes both ways, but that's why it's still I feel like it's sometimes people feel that it's being compared.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said in the NAMI thing, it's more so that men and women are inherently different and
Right.
are raised,
Absolutely.
but they have different societal expectations. So you almost not have to talk about it more and like women aren't going through it, but it's got to be, I guess, talk about
In
like
the chase
because
of the conversation of equality, we have buried men alive, and
yeah,
I firmly believe that. While I agree there are a lot of things that women experience while they're up and coming and getting all the rights and stuff that they have, I feel men have been buried, men have been devalued, men have been told to rub dirt on it, and
oh
we
yeah,
don't talk about what we
yeah,
experience.
it's like you don't cry. Even now, like I don't, I
Yeah,
start crying, I lock that shit up and just
right. And that's because of
yeah,
our generation. And I'd like to think that I'm contributing to trying to make that change where we're talking about it. I mean, I had George, who arguably is one of the more mentally sound of our group because he doesn't really express emotion.
yeah,
When we talked about Santi, we got the human out of him. He cried on a public platform, and not to put him on a spotlight out there, but that's one of my biggest objectives of this podcast is if I can get a guy on here and we can have that conversation where they're actually like giving me something. Like, look at the Nani podcast. Sean and Derek and myself shared a piece of us on a national platform that 10 years ago we couldn't do
yeah, or
because
even a
society
year or
tells us
two
not to.
ago, like
Right.
that you wanted to. For those that don't know, the NAMI podcast was a panel with you and
Me, Trenton, who was the host, and a NAMI representative, Derek Fields, and Sean Young.
who has been on the podcast before. Sean
Mm-hmm.
Young also has his own YouTube channel and podcast,
Yeah,
or
Spotify and YouTube.
Spotify and
Mm-hmm.
YouTube. Obviously, check on the page for any of those former podcasts. They are all on there under mental health movement.
Yeah, and if you can't find it under mental health movement, because I've had people struggle finding it on Spotify sometimes, try typing in "voice for the voiceless" and you should be able to find me. Um, but yeah, man, like I said, I just the trauma thing is probably the biggest problem um, I see in the mental health community. It's just comparing each other's struggles.
All right, so now I have a more of a lighter question, but what are some of your the bigger influences of your life, like mental health wise, like in the movement? I know obviously outside of that bands and stuff, but is there, Tiffany, I know you've read her book.
Tiffany's a really big inspiration. I think she's probably one of the most wholesome human beings I've ever met. There's Heather, who I've also had on here, who's the holistic healer. Santi, of course, really big influence on a lot of the stuff that I cover. And I just feel anybody who's had any kind of an impact. I mean, you've inspired me in a lot of ways because you offer different perspectives on things that usually we can bounce off of each other. And my therapist, of course, I truly don't think a lot of this would be possible without her. I mean, yeah, I've put in the work, um, and she's helped me see life from a different perspective and taught me boundaries and honoring my inner child. Um, but yeah, man, those are my inspirations. All the people who have been in my immediate circle for the last 10 years, or probably 5 years.
So now we on the group we posted a poll, so to speak, of some questions some of the members would have liked to hear
Yeah.
asked. So I figured we'll go over and ask a couple of those, and then go back to the other questions. Now, I didn't write whose name.
I think the first
who
one was
wrote these.
Judy.
So the first one might be Judy. So we spoke about this earlier. What is your view on school counseling, and do they do enough or not? Now, before you answer that, I'd like to add on the roles of school counselors. I feel it's also, you got to consider they don't necessarily have, some parents may not want their kids in therapy or getting therapy, or that kind of help. I feel like the counselors are supposed to help them with products or stuff going on retaining the school, but it's so hard because you have stuff outside of school going on that's going to affect the kid in school. So I
Right.
feel like they are sometimes caught in between a rock and a
Yeah.
hard place
So
with where they're allowed to go. But
right.
I've had experience with good school counselors.
Mhm.
So what are your experiences with school counseling, and what do you think they should, if they schools should step it up and have a licensed
Right.
therapist
Mhm.
available, and where, with the boundaries with parents and stuff, how do
So
you?
I feel like the budgeting in schools in general wouldn't be able to suffice with a licensed therapist just for the simple fact that school fundings just in general are I don't think they're very efficient just in general. Um, Now with counselors, so my first like mental health uh struggles were in like sixth grade, and I saw a school counselor because things were just still trying to process my parents not being together and going to two different homes all the time just kind of always felt very off to me, and of course my unstable living situation with my mom. That therapist was really good because she taught me journaling. Um, she told me to write down my thoughts, which, of course, going over the years, sixth to like eighth grade, I went to two different middle schools. So I don't want to say I kind of forgot about her, but I was at that age where it didn't stick because I didn't see her long. Um, I would love to see licensed therapists in schools. I again, it's all a matter of budgeting too. That's the biggest problem because I don't feel like schools in general, regardless of
Yeah.
state, would put money into getting a therapist in there. Because for me personally,
And even if they did, it might be like a free
yeah,
counseling type
exactly,
of like
right,
situation. We need one therapist, 2,000 students in a
yeah,
school.
exactly.
It's not
Um,
fair to the therapist either.
School counseling, I feel like is great because they can provide you the resources to get help.
Yeah.
But I wish there was more in detail that they handle because, obviously the school shooter thing is getting really out of hand. And while that falls on our leaders, I also feel like something more can be done in schools because just
Yeah.
just to graze over this very, very carefully because I don't want to dig into that case. But when you see these kids get bullied to the point of
That's what I was gonna say.
yeah,
I
when
feel
they
like
when
if
they get to a point of bullying
that they
said kid that did what he did.
Yeah.
And those kids aren't held accountable. Not putting blood on anybody's hands here.
No, but they offer counseling after the kid comes in and does that in school. But they don't offer counseling to him when he's getting bullied. They don't offer
And not only
consequences
that,
to the bully.
right, and not only that, but also they don't um what's the phrase that I'm looking for here? Um when they have red flags on that said kid and they are aware of said kid and still nothing is being given to them,
They're all
resources or
instead of
anything else.
proactive.
Right. And again, it falls on our leaders and it falls on the education system and it falls on law enforcement. There are a lot of pieces that go into that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
it's a multifaceted
Right. And
puzzle,
again,
and they
I don't want to trigger anybody with that conversation. I want to very carefully graze over it. But with the school counseling thing, I would love to see them offer more for kids.
yeah,
I don't think if there's an attempt at school, the kids should be Baker acted. I do think that they should be given to a counselor and
yeah,
metaphorically talked off a cliff and get them the resources that that kid deserves because 14-year-old me would have killed for those kind of resources.
yeah. Because a lot of people and I've seen a couple of different videos with therapists and psychiatrists and stuff, where they say a lot of times it's when a kid attempts, it's more of it's a cry for help,
Yeah,
and it not cry for, I hate to say cry for attention, but
it's not an attention thing.
not, yeah, not like, not attention like, oh, no one's paying
It's a cry
attention
for
to
help.
me, but it's like a help,
100%.
like I need like someone, look at me and help me.
That was, I remember my mindset, and I remember I had, like I said, I had a plan, I had means, and I was going to do it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't for attention. It wasn't because I wanted my face all over MySpace.
No, no. When I said attention, I didn't
No,
mean
no,
like
no. I,
that,
I know,
but
I
like,
know what you meant, but I want to navigate that just
yeah,
to. I know what you were saying. The cry for help thing is 100% accurate because
yeah,
suicidal people don't say they're going to do it; they just do it, and that's the truth.
yeah. I was gonna say I've had, when I was in high school, there was a girl that unalived herself in her closet by hanging.
Mhm.
Whereas where like the studies show that when people want to do it, they'll do it, and then when they want to get help, they'll have a bunch of steps that where they'll hope someone along the lines is going to stop me and
Mhm.
help me
Right.
instead of going through it.
But
Now,
I think it doesn't matter on degree, what a degree that somebody holds in whatever position they're in, because if the doctor, regardless if they have a bachelor's, regardless if they have their doctorates or masters, if they want to help you, they're going to help you.
yeah,
It shouldn't matter what degree you hold, because if you
right.
give a shit about somebody, you're going to do everything in your power to care for that person.
Even if with the schools, if they don't have counselors giving, I guess, necessarily advice or anything like that, just having someone that kids can come and vent to
Yeah,
without fear of their
being locked up.
parents or locked up,
Hmm.
mocked, and made
Right.
fun of. And because some people can't vent, you can't vent to your parents about your parents.
Hmm.
You can't, and then some people can't vent to their parents about school because of, excuse me, of how they're raised,
Yep.
how their home life is. They may, not everyone has
I
a solid
specifically
home life.
remember in the hell grade was it? Fourth grade, teacher named Miss Fields. Um, she made fun of me in front of the whole class because I was never taught how to do cursive, and she made fun of me and she bullied me in front of the entire class. And I told my mom about it. The next day, my mom went in there and chewed her ass off in front of the principal. Again, that falls on the conversation of kids being scared to talk to their parents about some stuff because of situations like that. I mean, yeah, I got put into a different and better teacher, but that's one of the biggest reasons that kids fear talking to their parents because of shit like that. Because you don't want to be labeled as the kid who cried to their mommy because of something like that happened. And
Yeah, I
that
mean,
shit happened in fourth grade. That was what, 15, almost
Yeah,
20 years ago
that's,
now,
I
and I
guess,
still remember that.
good that your mom defended you, but there's different. The teacher should have handled it differently. Your mother could have handled it differently. I mean, my mother would have done the same thing, but there's a. All right, so now some of the other questions I had written down. For people that are just starting their path of, I guess, healing, whether it's going to therapy, reaching out to the text hotline that you were also part of for a little bit, or because I know there's a suicide awareness hotline. They streamlined that and made it more easier. I know Juice World has one.
Yeah.
It's like 999 or something on the phone,
Right.
and a few others out there. So any advice that you would give them, like maybe something like if you might have gone into therapy thinking it's going to be like this, and it was like that, and like just anything you could, words of wisdom or
Yeah.
advice or
So
tips, tricks.
for those of you who are struggling and are in a current crisis state of mind, the suicide hotline has been made easier. If you dial 988, you will be directed to the crisis hotline. I myself have used it for myself and for others. Um, and I highly recommend that as a big resource because they are some of the most phenomenal human beings I've ever talked to. Now, with that being said, words of wisdom for people who are just now starting their healing journey, and whether that's you're just gonna have a nasty divorce, whether you're going through a custody battle with your kids, whatever. Um, feel your feelings is probably the biggest piece of advice I could give anybody, and it's something I read out of Dr. Deborah Vinal's book, "Feel the Void That You're In." Because if you don't feel your feelings, if you deny yourself of crying, or you deny yourself of feeling what you're feeling when you're experiencing what you're experiencing, you're going to bottle all that shit up and you're going to erupt. Essentially, like the water versus soda argument. You shake up a bottle of water, it's still water. You shake up soda, it explodes. Um, I just feel all of your feelings and validate everything that you're going through. Forgive yourself and have patience because healing doesn't happen overnight. And it might take years, it might take months. But feel your feelings is the best piece of advice I can
So I was
possibly
gonna
say.
say, I know some people go in. I know a couple people like this that go in and start doing therapy and start getting their life on track, and they're waiting for like this almost like
Magic.
euphoric moment of like, oh, I'm doing
Oh,
everything
so
right
much better.
now. Why am I not happy? Why
Right.
am I not? I'm taking the medicine. I'm
Mhm.
doing the therapy or the whatever it needs to be done, and I'm still just blah. I feel like some people go into it with this expectation that
Yeah.
like, oh, like happiness or
And
something that they're going to be, they're
right.
not going to feel sadness or anything anymore.
And the thing with therapy is, and a NAMI representative told me this, and I've shared it prior in other podcasts. But before you go start therapy sessions with anybody, make sure you ask questions. Ask what that therapist may or may not cover. How much your sessions are going to cost. Obviously that's a real important thing because some therapists are unfortunately more expensive than others. Um, Make sure you ask questions always. And you're like, do you cover grief? Do you cover uh, loss? Do you cover abuse? You have to ask those questions because if you go in there for depression, but they only cover loss or not loss,
Anxiety or
yeah, anxiety
something.
or something, they might not be able to help you the way that you want to, thus creating that domino effect of, oh, well, therapy doesn't help because it didn't help me. Ask questions always. Um, Make sure that that therapist can take your insurance or see if they have a sliding scale because the sliding scale is a game changer in terms of a financial struggle. So,
Yeah, another one. It's kind of a more of a heavy question. You mentioned the void earlier, which is perfect for this one. Any, I guess, advice for someone looking into the proverbial or quote unquote void and not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, that they just keep seeing themselves going down the same through the same steps of therapy, work, feel
Right.
like
So just caught in that routine.
yeah, but they think that this is it, this is what it's gonna.
Yeah.
So I think just keep going, it's gonna get
I will
better.
I will never say that to anybody because that was what I was told before I started therapy,
Yeah,
and it's probably the worst advice you can say to somebody. It
which is
gets
why
better.
I was asking because that's what
It 100% gets better. But that
doesn't mean it
that
doesn't suck.
better comes with work. It comes with showing up for yourself. It comes with forgiving yourself for being, impatient about certain things, forgiving yourself for not giving yourself enough grace, not giving yourself enough credit for the shit that you do. I am guilty of beating the living shit out of myself over. I don't want to say the smallest things because they're not small to me, but
What is perceived as
right,
small things.
all my anxiety amplifies everything that I feel to like the 10th power. Like, for example, in the group, when I just recently shared about the second social media influencer I just booked, I immediately said, okay, my anxiety is telling me that I need to shut the fuck up and nobody wants to hear about constant good news.
And sadly, that's because
And that's because
probably
of how we grew up.
someone at some point in time you were excited, you went
Mm-hmm.
to go share something, we're like, yeah, we
It's like,
keep
oh, I
hearing
got a B
about,
plus. Well, why the fuck didn't you get an A?
but or they just are like, oh, you keep sharing excited, you keep
Yep.
telling us. So
I hate happy people.
it's like, but if you have the right friend group,
Mm-hmm.
or family, in some case,
Real
around
friends
you,
elevate you and hold you
yeah,
accountable.
they'll encourage you, but also let you know when you're fucking up.
Right. And I feel like if you're stuck in that routine of just not feeling like anything's getting better and you feel like a robot, because Lord knows I felt like that more times than not. Um, Try changing up your routine. I feel like if you put something out of place where it doesn't normally go and you try changing the order of your routine, I feel like can benefit you a lot because it challenges your brain. It's like, oh well, I'm so used to doing this at this time, but now I'm going to do it earlier, and you switch those two activities around,
Yeah.
or add something else in there. I'm not saying overwhelm your plate, but I'm also saying uh, don't stay content with your situation. If you feel like you want things to get better, you have to constantly challenge yourself. And as one of my favorite human beings in the world, John Cena says, earn every single day, earn every single moment that you have, because you know it's unfortunate, but we all eventually perish. This life is not permanent. If you earn every single day, you earn every single moment that you're given, every opportunity. When you start feeling the good things that are coming back to you, those good things are amplified into great things, and those great things turn into another life. It turns into something you never thought was possible. There are so many things that I have experienced over this last year and a half, 2 years, that I never thought was possible. I never thought that almost 2,000 people would give a shit what I have to say. I never thought that there would be 14 countries to even listen to half the things I have to say. And now I'm talking with people in Denmark. I'm talking with people in South Africa. I mean, anything's possible if you're willing to put the work in.
Not to mention the band member
Yeah.
that you had, or the guitar singer.
Lead singer for Citizen Soldier, right?
Yeah. And then you have someone else in the music industry on the
Gray Lee, right?
and talks about.
So I had Gray Lee come on there, who's up and coming.
Yep.
And then I had Jacob, who is lead singer for Citizen Soldier.
He's one that just got done touring, correct?
Right, and I believe he's going on tour again.
Nice.
And there is also another gentleman who is currently writing a book, but is really heavy on suicide awareness, and just trying to uplift others around him. But yeah, man, change up your routine, constantly challenge yourself, change up your routine by any means necessary, and hold yourself accountable for things that um, just seem out of place or out of character for you, because we all make mistakes. We're human beings, but hold yourself accountable and learn to forgive yourself at the same time.
All right, now back to some questions about you, the host. Um, do you have a favorite episode that you've done on the podcast?
Oh,
if so, why?
So I think every episode gets better in a sense. I feel like every guest I come on here, no, but I don't think any. I don't have a favorite guest who has come on here.
That's why I didn't ask that one
Yeah,
to put you. I just there was just one episode you
it's
did
tough.
where you were like the mess because they all have their own different messages, subjects, topics.
I felt like the social norms podcast I did was really good. Um, it's definitely up there in my at least top five. I mean, it's hard to pick which one's my favorite because I think they're all phenomenal.
Yeah,
Tiffany's one of my favorite episodes. It was really cool getting to know her and seeing the
and one of the first
yeah, one of the first bigger guests. Yeah,
because there's another guest before. Was Heather before or after her?
she was after.
Okay, so yeah, Tiffany technically was
Right.
the
She
or
was the one that started.
yeah, the very published
Yep.
author. The first guest is pretty big deal.
Yeah, and then she's the one who offered me the opportunity to get on the NAMI panel.
Yeah, but
I love that one. That episode was great.
yeah,
Um, I had a lot of really good feedback from a lot of people. Deborah, who I had at the beginning of this year, another great episode about gaslighting. Um, I'm really looking forward to the conversations with Shar and Sid because Sid
yeah,
talks
they
about a lot of the
have
shit
some
that I
heavy
went through,
content.
and then Shar with the mental health advocacy is just powerful for me. So
Disclaimer: this podcast is done before the podcast with Sid
right,
and Shar.
yeah,
So if you're listening to this and you're wondering why we're talking about those, when those at the time this is dropped, those will already be out for the
right.
world to listen to. Now, this will I'll probably double in this question together. What are some things you are passionate about outside of mental health, and what are some of your favorite bands?
So I'm very passionate about music, of course. Lincoln Park is one of my number one, if not number one, artists, just because Chester Bennington's story and him just putting out his putting out the word uh,
Yeah,
mental health before mental health was really even talked about. To be honest, he was. I feel like he was one of the first men to talk about the shit that he went through. You know, his sexual abuse, addiction, self harm, of all things that doesn't get talked about enough, in my opinion. I feel like that's one of the biggest like gray areas of the mental health struggles that nobody talks about because I remember growing up and I have done self-harm, and for anybody who actually knows this story, the placement of my tattoos is where I self-harm. So the person who did these tattoos reached out to me on before my second attempt, um, and I wanted her to do my tattoos, and the placement I have for these tattoos are for that reason. um, I I'm very passionate about music. Very passionate about wrestling. Wrestling is probably one of my top three passions because it's something that helped me escape pretty much my whole life. I've been watching since I was 7 years old. Um, and of course, movies. I associate almost every conversation I have with people through movie quotes. I don't know why my brain immediately goes there in any conversation I have with people, but I could quote movies probably the entire day. I mean,
yeah,
I quote movies with you almost all the time.
yeah.
So yeah, those are the top three things that I'm passionate about. But music being my number one, I'm always looking for new music, always trying to discover who's talking about mental health through their music, and of course, Chester being one, From Ashes to New being another, Citizen Soldier, who is not only a musician, but he is also a therapist. So I thought that was really cool.
That is pretty cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and
And I
hopefully,
know video gaming is another one.
yeah, video gaming, of course. Again, that was another means of escaping my
Yeah,
hectic home
yeah.
life.
Video games and reading for mine. That's why
Comic books, yeah,
I read the shit out of the Harry Potter books, like
right,
when I was grounded a lot. Parents were always arguing, headphones on, and Harry Potter.
yeah,
Now we have a couple more groups from some members in the mental health movement group on Facebook. It is a private group, so look it up and request it, and we will approve you. There, a couple rules to agree to before you get approved.
right.
Now, someone asked, what are your thoughts on the relation of crime and mental health? As in, they statistically say more uh, crime is committed by kids raised in single parent households. I'm not don't know the exact statistics on it, so the statistics
Right.
might have changed. And I know there is obviously correlation. Like
Absolutely.
I grew up with a stepdad, but like I didn't get in trouble because I knew I would have to like deal with him at
Hmm.
the house.
Right.
Whereas if I was raised by just my mom, I mean, by the time I'm 14, 15, 'cause I had friends that only had their mom around and
Hmm.
stuff. And what was she going to do? Ground them? Like, oh, okay, I'm not going to listen. I was going to leave. She
Right.
can't physically stop them.
Mm.
So that's what I've seen growing up. But obviously, I know it goes both ways. It has to be like I feared my dad getting in trouble, so now I in turn feared
Right.
going to prison.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely feel like single parent households contribute a lot to uh, crime rates just for the simple fact that they don't have a father figure around, or a stable father figure at that being around to, uh, you know, of course the mom can teach right and wrong, but the mom is there for nurturing, the mom is there for emotional support, while you need to have the dad who is technically speaking supposed to be in charge of disciplining, which, we're in a society where there are really no gender roles in parenting anymore.
Yeah,
Some parents are better at emotional, while other parents might be better at disciplining, or
yeah. But
talking to their
there's
kids.
still got to be a fear,
Yeah, yeah, of course.
discipline. Not that you want to be afraid of your dad, but like I was afraid to get in trouble. Whereas,
You're taught what's right and what's
yeah,
wrong.
I witnessed friends say like, "Oh, what's the rest of my mom going to do? Ground me?
Right,
She going to do try to slap me? Like,
right,
okay, I'm still going to do what I want." And I've seen that mentality
right.
carry to how they interact with law enforcement because there's a difference between having a mom and dad that are separate and dad still being present, or another father figure role being present, whereas there is no father figure present and you're growing up. Even if you're growing up around your dad and he's still not, he's just
So
making sure you're, alive and fed and not
yeah.
really being a parent, so to
So
speak.
with my parents, obviously they were divorced 8 years old. 2001, I believe, was when it was official. Um, and my dad was present. We only saw him on the weekends. My mom did a good job at making up lies about my dad to make me fear my dad,
Yeah,
so I didn't do anything wrong. But again, this is a very recent uh, discoveries. I never knew there was physical abuse in my house until I started talking to my therapist about it. And obviously, the word abuse is thrown around, and I feel like it is a buzzword for many.
yeah,
Um, I was abused by my mom mentally and physically. Now, when it comes to the the question at hand, um, I feel like we're in a place in the prison system where they're finally starting to rehab some of these inmates, and trying to give them uh, means to improve their character. I've seen some documentaries and I've seen some clips of prisoners who are in there for the rest of their life, and the system has given them a chance to guide other inmates of who might be in there for a lesser crime than themselves, and trying to help those people find work, because
yeah.
that's the number one thing in the prison system is if you're a felon, it's hard to get work.
And I've also, with the mental health and prison relation, I've seen this interview. This guy was schizophrenic, and he had an episode where he was like in his mind, he believed there was three dudes um, essaying a little girl in the house, and in his mind, they told him to light the house on fire.
I
So
remember
he
that.
he
Yeah.
ended up getting an arson charge and going to prison for 8 years. Whereas if he may have gotten the proper treatment for his schizophrenia, he may have never burned down the house. And now if you get into prison and you're not in the psych ward and you're in with
Right.
regular inmates, you might be abused in there, and it just might start a perpetual
Yeah,
cycle.
and I feel like a lot of mental health diagnoses are what's the word, um, undetermined, or not
Yeah,
undetermined, undiscovered. That's the word. Because they don't.
not recognized. Yeah, they're not
Yeah, they're
recognized
not
either.
recognized, or they're not treated for it prior to whatever crime is being committed, because again, resources being a problem.
Yeah.
Again, we're in a society where men are told to rub dirt in their wounds. We're not told to speak out. We're not told to talk about what happened at home. If we're in a relationship and you're getting the shit kicked out of you by your woman, because it does happen, guys. And while that may be unpopular with some people who might listen to this, it does happen. Just because there are recorded uh, statistics of women that report it more doesn't mean it doesn't happen on the other side, because it
And I've
absolutely
seen
does.
videos of women like talking crap to the man. Like,
That's
what
what
are
I'm
you, what are the
saying.
cops going to believe? I'll run my
Right.
face into, I'll slam my head on the counter and tell
Yeah,
them you hit me
it
first.
does happen.
So it's
I
like
witnessed that happen to my dad. I believe I was 7 years old when my dad got arrested. Um, my mom and dad got into a huge fight because my dad found out that she was cheating on him with my future stepdad at the time, and he was yelling because he was upset, and she threw shit at him. She ripped off his necklace and left a bunch of bruises on him and shit. And of course, being a man of their generation, they don't talk about that shit. It's like, oh yeah, I was yelling at her and everything. I pushed her away, but it doesn't matter. The law will always arrest the man first, because that's the society that we're in. In the journey of trying to chase equality, like I said earlier, we have buried men alive. We have devalued men. We don't validate men's feelings of what they're going through, um, especially in domestic violence stuff, man. Because I've seen people get falsely accused and nothing happens to their spouse, and it's infuriating. But again, going back to that question, I think that it's in a better place in the prison system now than we were probably in the last 5 years. I just wish that there was better programs to help felons get work, because I feel like once you're in that system, you stay in that system. I mean, the guy that my mom left my dad for was in and out of jail for 30 something years. Um, some for stupid shit, some for some really serious shit.
yeah,
But again, it's tough because felons, once you're a felon, I mean, that mentality of and that security of what they do for you in prison versus the real world that treats you like a piece of shit, doesn't give you work, doesn't give you the
proper
opportunities.
treatment if you
Right.
are, like a stay down on that guy. Anytime it's a schizophrenic episode, when they type in his name, it's going to come up arson,
Mhm.
not arsonist, not schizophrenic guy. Treat with caution. It's going to
Exactly.
be, oh, this is a convicted arsonist, guys.
Right.
Be careful.
Exactly.
Now we have another question from someone in the group saying, how has your personal journey shaped how you interact with others?
Oh man. So I had a therapy session with Jess. I believe this had to have been 6 months ago, maybe a little longer. Um, that she said, I'm the person for other people that I wish I had when I was younger. That is couldn't be any uh couldn't be any more true, just for the simple fact that I try to be a light for everybody around me. Um I try to give as much of myself to other people as humanly possible. Um Sometimes I um overfill other people's cups and leave myself bone dry. Um, just being the type of person I am. Now I'm getting a little bit better on it. I'm getting a little bit better on boundaries and stuff.
Don't
But
pour from an empty cup.
right. And I just feel all those hard times, all the both attempts, all the physical and mental abuse that I endured. I don't want to see anybody go through that again. Or again, I don't want to see anybody go through that like I had to. And I don't want to see other people not speak out because they're afraid to. I
Yeah.
mean,
As as your brother looking in, I feel like you try to be the friend you wish you had when you
right.
were feeling alone to
Hmm.
other people.
Exactly.
But sometimes you still got to remember to be the friend for yourself first.
Absolutely. Um, there are a handful of people in a group that when they first joined didn't peep a word, just were observers. And we encourage that. If you don't feel comfortable
Yeah, you don't have
to
to.
share,
You can
you
observe. You
don't
can.
have to
There's
share.
also now an anonymous
Right.
option to post anonymously on the group.
Yeah. And now most of them speak out, most of them share their story, and gotten some people comfortable enough to where they're making videos and posting it in the group. And it's good things happen to people who are willing to put in the work. um not to say that the people that are handed it are bad people, but I don't feel like
There's more
you
of an appreciation.
yeah, I feel like the humbleness goes away if shit's given to you.
Yeah.
um but yeah, man, just mainly um what I had to endure, I don't want other people to have to take on. So if I could be that light for people, that's absolutely what I want to be.
Now, in this answer could, this is a heavy question, so the answer could be long. There's
Mm.
a lot of parts to it. Any words of wisdom on how to cope with grief? Because there is no, like, it doesn't ever go away.
Yeah.
You might grow around it, and it may not upset you as much as it did when it first happened, as opposed to a couple years down the road and a couple years after that and stuff like that. Especially when you have to, you can't just lie. Like, you got to still wake up, go to work, pay bills, and it's like you forget about it, and then something happens, and you remember your friend, brother, family, and it's like ripping the band-aid off all over again.
So with grief, man, yeah, it is a very loaded question because it's a very
Yeah, that's why I said you want to try to, want
so
to
okay.
keep that answer.
Um, just to kind of like start from the beginning process of grief, because like you said, there's no right or wrong way to grief. There's no time limit on grief. On grief, um, you can be fine one day, and then a week later, it hits you like a landmine, and you fall apart like it's the first day that it ever happened. Um, the biggest piece of advice that I can give somebody who's experiencing grief for the first time in their life, because believe it or not, there are some people who have never experienced grief. And
Yeah,
um,
so
just
it's like an
before,
acceptance almost.
yeah, before I answer the question, I wish that they taught that in school. I wish they taught grief in school. Um, the most teaching I had about grief was a Robot Chicken episode. Believe it or not, we were showed it in psychology class, and it was on grief, and it was a giraffe shown in quicksand. And it goes through the stages of grief, but obviously in a comedy aspect of acceptance, anger, bargaining, and then just kind of there are so like okay, so when Santi first passed away, I would have traded everything that I have, including my own life, just so his kids can have their dad back, just so Keisha can have her fiance and the love of her life back. Um, and after his funeral, um, acceptance took a long time to reach. Still to this day, and we're almost at 2 years. Doesn't feel like it's real.
No.
A lot of anger and grief,
Yeah.
because you just wish it didn't happen to them because they were such a good person, or wish that they would have had more resources available to them if something else happened to them other than somebody taking their life.
Yeah. More time or
Right. And him and I went to high school together. We've known each other since high school, but we
Yeah.
didn't start getting close until my second attempt.
Yeah, and I feel it's important for people to know, like, it's different when if someone goes suddenly as opposed to if you have an elderly family member that's sick. Like, okay, they only have, like, something that you could almost plan and prepare up to where, like, this day would finally happen, as opposed to getting a phone call and it, like, upending. So that's a whole different, because then it's always the what if. At least you know it's coming from someone
Right.
being sick. It's more like, well, they lived a good life. They had, were able to plan it out, sort of, see everybody. So it's a it's
Yeah,
I should have asked it different because it's a multifaceted. There's so
yeah,
many different factors depending on
I definitely agree on the
in his
elderly.
situation. Like, you know,
The elderly loss, I feel like is it's in the same conversation, but it's not the
yeah,
same in
not to
terms of
diminish like
somebody
losing your
suddenly gone.
grandma still sucks to someone you've
Yeah,
known your
of
whole life and
course.
stuff, but it's opposed to someone that's your friend that's the same age or younger than you that essentially has their whole life ahead of them
Yeah,
or has already started it, has kids in Santi's case and stuff, to where there's a lot of different factors that weigh on it more.
right.
Unfortunate.
Yeah, and you know the biggest thing with Santi, you know, even before him when Amy passed away, you know, he ironically enough helped me get through the grieving process
Yeah,
while he was still with us, ultimately preparing
himself,
for
future.
his
Yeah,
passing. And you know, the biggest thing that grief taught me was honoring their memory. You know, it's I hate saying it like, oh well, remember that they were happy, remember that they lived a good life and they had a good legacy and all that stuff. But honor all the memories you had with them, honor all the lessons that you learned from that person. I mean, Santi, in those 3 years that I grew very close to him, we learned a lot from each other. I mean, he talked about me in his church to people. He sent people to me that were struggling with mental health stuff. I mean, him and I bounce off of each other so well that he believed in me so heavy um,
he still does.
in this journey. And the hardest part of grief is accepting that they're gone. The the easiest way to cope with that grief is honoring how great of a human being they are. You know, whether that's a tattoo or whether that's the last picture you took with them
Or a charm or a
or a
necklace.
medallion that you had made for them. There's no wrong way to remember somebody, and there's no wrong way to grieve somebody. So feel everything that you're feeling. You know, much like the other question asked. Feel everything you're going to feel in grief because it's not going to be over a week. It's not going to be overnight that you're going to get over it. Some people deal with death a little easier than others. Some people are numb to it, and yes, that absolutely does happen. Um, but honor their memory, honor everything that you have to them, and if you have something of theirs, or if you want to get something in their memory, like he said, the medallion or the tattoos, whatever, uh, keep their memory alive and what they meant to you to your heart. But also remember to share your heart with people too. Don't ball it up and store it away because the second you feel it, it's going to feel 100 times worse. That grief gets easier to deal with over time, but that grief doesn't ever go away. It's you have to accept that they're gone and accept that you can never physically have a conversation with them again. But look for signs of those people in your life. Like Santi, for me, is the moon. You know, just because that's just for some reason I just associate that with him. And then Amy is are my sunsets. You know, do everything you can to honor their memory because without those memories, you know, some people don't have that luxury of being able to celebrate because of circumstances.
It makes you want to take photos of everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that might be the last of my written down questions. But another one that I was just thinking of, what do you have for future podcast guests? Who would you like to have be on, like, you know, dream guest or
Oh man, dream guest would be the lead singer of Disturbed. Um, he was really big in that circle of Chris Cornell and Chester Bennington. He talks about mental health stuff. I mean, a lot of the guys in the music industry that are my dad's age are talking about mental health stuff, that are opening about mental health stuff. I would love to get Matt and Danny on a podcast from Ashes to New. I don't know how realistic it is because they are really big, and I know there's like contracts of where certain people can go, especially with podcast stuff like that.
Yeah, you gotta
Um,
can't hurt the image, especially if
exactly,
record labels own Disturb.
exactly.
You don't know who owns what
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
I think those got the lead singer of Godsmack, the lead singer of Shinedown. I mean, those guys are really heavy on addiction and awareness and stuff. So
Yeah, which is another. Uh,
yeah, it's a huge realm. I would love to dip my feet into.
yeah, because those go hand in
God
hand.
willing that it gets bigger than I am now.
Oh yeah,
Um, I would love to try and reach out to from Ashes to New just to see if they would be willing to do it. But again, those record labels make things really hard.
oh yeah,
But it's not unattainable. Like I said, you got to put in the work for things like that to happen, and I feel like I'm definitely putting in a lot of work for all these opportunities.
oh yeah. No, I mean, you said, like I said earlier, you've been doing a podcast every 2 weeks for the better part of a year and three,
Yep.
4 months,
Hmm.
nailing down licensed authors, published authors, musicians, a whole list of YouTubers,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So you come a long way. Thanks for having me on again,
Yeah.
giving me the opportunity to interview, give
Yeah. This was
the
a
fans a little something to know the voice behind the mic a little bit.
right.
Well,
Yeah. I mean, I feel like when you brought this idea, I loved it just for the simple fact that, like you were saying, that I host people. I'm never never the person to ask stuff. So it's
yeah,
really cool to get that aspect out there.
yeah. I said it gives everyone else a little bit more of a better understanding of you, why you're doing this, and hope it takes off and continue doing it. Remember, guys, it is on Spotify, YouTube. There's an Instagram page, the Facebook page, Mental Health Movement. And are you still on Apple Music?
Yeah, it's still on
And
iTunes.
still on
Yeah.
iTunes, Apple Music, whatever it's called now.
Yeah.
Feel free to like, subscribe, and if you could share, possibly.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you being on. Appreciate the idea. I really enjoyed this interview a lot. Before we close out today's episode, do you have any specific quotes that you yourself live by or that you want to share that just kind of keeps you going?
Yeah, there's just one that I generally think back to and quote to some people. It's the more you run away from your problems, the more tired you are when they catch up to you. And because sometimes it's all, I've had my issues of procrastinating and wanting to deal with shit later, and this, and I don't want to think about it. And it's 9% of the time they don't just go away. And I realize a lot if I just do what I need to do or, handle what I need to handle, it's a lot easier than dealing with it after. Normally it gets worse before it gets better. So
Yeah,
the quicker you can deal with the problems, the easier it is.
absolutely, man. I pulled up one geared towards men's mental health. This is from the Mind Journal. So it says 76% of suicides are by men, with suicide being the biggest cause of death for men under 35. Yet men are less likely to speak out or access psychological therapies than women. We need to break the stigma and end the silence. Do not man up. It's time to talk. Um, I couldn't possibly stress that message enough. Um, Guys, for the ones that do listen to this podcast, uh, I am always here if you need to talk. And, I'm not, I know a lot of people out there just kind of like, oh, well, I don't talk about my problems like that or whatever the case. It's better to read your story while you're here instead of reading your obituary.
I
I
feel like,
Go ahead.
so I feel like that quote can be summed up as speaking up is the new manning up, or
Yeah,
speaking up is manning up.
absolutely.
Manning up is speaking up.
There's a shirt from the Valhalla Project that I like wearing. It says, "There's true strength in asking for help. Don't ever be afraid to ask somebody for help, and don't ever be afraid to reach out to somebody." And for those people who are confident in speaking out about their problems, reach out to your friends that you feel look really strong on the outside, look like they're handling all the things that they're going through fine, because there are so many of us who can put on that smile every day and just take it off at the end of the day when nobody's seeing us and we cry or we're upset because life isn't the way that they want it to be, man. So speak out, be there for each other. Be well, guys, and as always, be gentle with yourselves. Until next time, thank you.